April 28th, walnutstreettheater.org. And visit Denver. Denver will add over 2,600 new hotel rooms this year. The airport is adding 39 new airport gates, and the Colorado Convention Center is adding new meeting space. More at conventionselevated.com.
Deer Park, Texas residents have been told to stay indoors. Elevated levels of benzene were detected after a huge fire at a chemical storage facility this week, though yesterday, state environmental officials said benzene levels did not pose a health concern. Details still ahead this hour on Here and Now.
Supporting WHYY Rydell Park. This life plan community is conveniently located in Abington Township, just a brief train ride from the cultural attractions of Center City. Rydell Park is experiencing new growth with Rydell Waters, a planned cottage community featuring a clubhouse, fitness center, pool, dog park, and trails. Learn more at exploreRydellPark.org and exploreRydellWaters.org. Rydell Park and Rydell Waters, exceptional without exception.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston, from Home Advisor, matching homeowners with home improvement professionals for a variety of home projects. From minor repairs to major remodels, homeowners can read reviews of local pros and book appointments online at homeadvisor.com. And Linguistica 360 with News in Slow Spanish, News in Slow French, Italian, and German programs. Weekly language learning shows with discussion of current events. More at newsandslow.com. News and Slow, language learning through current events.
This is Here and Now from NPR and WBUR. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Shares of the biotech company Biogen fell nearly 30% when the market opened this morning on news that the company is discontinuing trials on a much-hyped Alzheimer's drug. The drug, which is known as aducanumab, was in phase 3 trial, the last stage before FDA approval. For more, let's go to Robin Farzad, host of Public Radio's Full Disclosure. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Jeremy.
So getting an effective Alzheimer's drug on the market is one of the biggest, most elusive goals in pharma research. But why were people betting on this particular drug?
Because Biogen had gone so far down the approval process with Wall Street and families of those suffering from Alzheimer's, which has been such a hopeless affliction. They were putting so much hope into what was expected to be a blockbuster. Goldman Sachs had pegged potential sales of about $12 billion just for this one drug.
And so why did they give up then?
Management says that the decision to stop was based on an independent group's analysis that showed that the trials were unlikely to, quote, meet their primary endpoint. And Biogen did reiterate that, you're not talking about safety concerns here, but the longer the expectation continues, the more blowback a publicly traded corporation like Biogen is going to get by not being totally forthcoming about this drug's path to market. Again, this was expected to be a blockbuster. You don't see moonshots like this in stage 3 all that often.
And just to put the failure in context, 99% of Alzheimer's drug trials have failed over the last 15 years. What do we know about why this disease in particular is so hard to treat?
Yeah, it's such a nasty, shape-shifting target. I mean, much of the research into potential Alzheimer's drugs focuses on the buildup in the human brain of beta amyloid, and that combating that sticky substance can help sufferers, both current and future. This is a big setback today for that hypothesis. I mean, Pfizer said last year that it would stop trying to discover new Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease drugs outright. And to date, no drugs have been approved to treat the underlying causes of Alzheimer's.
Now, this is not the first time that Biogen has seen its stock have this kind of volatility. In June of 2016, the shares dropped when a drug to treat multiple sclerosis failed. How easy is it for these pharma companies to recover when a drug like this doesn't end up working out?
You always have to strike a balance, especially for a corporation the size of Biogen. I mean, the balance is between research and development pipeline, which is speculative but potentially lucrative, with legacy franchises that need to be milked before generics are allowed in. And of course, if A and B fail, then you can go into mergers and acquisitions. And Biogen today just hemorrhaged $18 billion in market value. And this is for pulling a project that it was developing jointly with a Japanese pharmaceutical. So the stakes are enormous.
And I'm sure that one of the things that we will hear is, especially when it comes to drug prices in general, are very high in this country, is that, this is why they're high, because the drug companies have to put so much money into R&D, and sometimes it doesn't work out. At the same time, taxpayers fund a lot of research that drug companies benefit from as well.
I think that's fair only up to a certain point. I mean, pharma and biotech, they often spend lavishly on marketing, overhead, executive comp. Many established players pay nice dividends and buy stock back. It's not like 99 cents out of every dollar they make is going back into R&D. These are for-profit companies, which is why you also sometimes have to make these brutal decisions to cut losses in something that everyone really wanted to succeed.
That is Robin Farzad, host of Public Radio's Full Disclosure. Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're listening to Here and Now.
Democratic Representative Abigail Spanberger won election from a conservative district. She grows impatient when her fellow Democrats press her to be more progressive.
And I would find it more helpful if other Democrats would talk about their districts and the priorities for their districts, so that I don't have to go back to my constituents and say, yes, I know that's not you all.
The pressure to stay true to party and to voters at home. On the next morning edition from NPR News.
Tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 on WHYY FM. I'm Jack Lepiarz. President Trump is signing an executive order today that threatens to cut off funding for colleges that don't protect free speech on campus. The president proposed the idea after video surfaced of a conservative activist being assaulted at the University of California, Berkeley. Colleges would be required to certify that they follow various free speech policies. The former president of Brazil is facing charges of corruption. Michel Temer was taken into custody after a judge authorized the charges against him. Details of the accusations haven't been specified. Mississippi's governor is signing into law one of the strictest abortion bills in the country. The measure bans nearly all abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected or about 6 weeks into pregnancy. Opponents are vowing to sue to block it from taking effect in July. You're listening to Here and Now. 50 degrees, rain falling at 1:39.
Supporting WHYY, Walnut Street Theater's The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. After 15-year-old Christopher is wrongly accused of a crime, he sets out to investigate on his own in this heartwarming adventure. Now through April 28th, walnutstreettheater.org. And visit Denver. Denver will add over 2,600 new hotel rooms this year. The airport is adding 39 new airport gates, and the Colorado Convention Center is adding new meeting space. More at conventionselevated.com.
Supporting WHYY Rydell Park. This life plan community is conveniently located in Abington Township, just a brief train ride from the cultural attractions of Center City. Rydell Park is experiencing new growth with Rydell Waters, a planned cottage community featuring a clubhouse, fitness center, pool, dog park, and trails. Learn more at exploreRydellPark.org and exploreRydellWaters.org. Rydell Park and Rydell Waters, exceptional without exception.
Funding for Here and Now comes from Amazon Web Services, working to help millions of customers from startups to enterprises to governments transform their industries with secure AI-ready cloud services. Learn more at awsishow.com. And the Museum of Science in Boston, providing pre-K through grade 12 engineering curricula from We Engineer to Engineering the Future with teacher guides, storybooks, kits, and videos, all designed to fuel dynamic STEM education. More at MOS.org.
This is Here and Now. A shelter-in-place order for a Houston suburb has now been lifted. Residents of Deer Park were told to stay indoors after a fire at a chemical plant this week released plumes of deadly smoke into the air. The fire burned for 3 days. It was put out yesterday, and officials had said the air around the city of Deer Park was safe to breathe. Then the shelter-in-place order and the Texas National Guard called in. Here's Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo.
We've got Harris County Pollution Control, the Texas National Guard's 6th Civil Support Team, which are experts in chemical surveillance. Harris County Hazardous Material Team, City of Houston hazmat team. They've all set 2 perimeters around the incident site to identify and analyze air quality readings in real time.
Joining us now is Travis Bubenik, Energy and Environment Reporter for Houston Public Media. Travis, early this morning, people were told they needed to wash off if they go outside, isolate any clothing they wore outside, and turn off the air conditioner. What changed?
Well, basically, officials say the levels of this toxin, benzene in particular, that spiked overnight and into this morning have since come back down to where they feel confident telling people you can go outside again.
What was burning at this chemical plant that made the smoke so toxic?
Well, what was burning was a bunch of different chemicals. You're talking about a complex of something like 15 huge chemical storage tanks. And these were components that were used in gasoline. Naphtha was one of them. I think xylene was another one, and there's some other names. But basically, petrochemicals that are used to make gasoline, to make nail polish, that kind of stuff, even glue, I think. Those were the components that have been burning over the last few days.
What are local officials there saying about why they said the air was safe yesterday, and then all of a sudden this morning they said, nope, it's not?
Well, there's two different things going on here, and really officials are pointing to data. Now, the air quality data that the county, the state, and the feds were looking at in recent days as the fire was actually burning didn't show anything particularly alarming at ground level. The smoke basically was way up in the atmosphere. They said it was moving away thanks to winds. The weather was cooperating to where it didn't pose any air quality risks at the ground level. What changed late last night and into this morning was after the fire went out, you had these chemical storage tanks where basically the chemicals were now exposed to the air, and the chemical vapors were going up into the air, creating different kinds of toxins going into the air. So the levels of those toxins, benzene in particular, spiked to above healthy levels early this morning, though they have since fallen back down.
What kind of scrutiny is the company that owns these storage tanks, ITC, going to be under now? And are there going to be new questions asked about how these kinds of chemicals are stored?
Well, state environmental regulators are certainly going to look at whether any fines need to be issued. Now, we should say in Texas that environmental groups have complained for years that fines on this industry that, generates millions and billions of dollars of revenue are slaps on the wrist usually. So you're going to hear some conversation about that, whether fines should be stepped up. Whether that happens is a totally different question in Texas, of course. And then there's also going to be some lingering questions about what the longer-term health impacts of both the fire and the cleanup effort here, and just the stuff that's sort of, run off of this toxic site into local waterways, possibly into the bay might be. There's a big question that's still open about what happened to that big smoke cloud when it left the Houston region. Did it fall on other communities outside of Houston? Those are the kind of things that people are going to be looking at.
Yeah, there are reports now that the water in the Houston Ship Channel is now black. Travis Bubenik, Energy and Environment Reporter for Houston Public Media, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
On Sunday, Lawrence Ferlinghetti turns 100. He's a poet who helped change the face of literary culture when he founded City Lights Bookstore and Publishing House in San Francisco back in the 1950s. He's marking his birthday with a new autobiographical novel. Here he is reading from Little Boy.
Little boy was quite lost. He had no idea who he was or where he had come from.
As KQED's Chloe Beltman reports, in many ways, Ferlinghetti has always had the mischief of a little boy.
Until recently, Lawrence Ferlinghetti was vacationing in Mexico, bobbing into City Lights and working on poetry. But the last couple of years have taken their toll on his almost 100-year-old body. Ferlinghetti is nearly blind. He spends a lot of time in bed and no longer does in-person interviews.
There's an echo in my phone. I'm not getting your voice very clearly.
But as soon as his assistant adjusts the volume on our call, Ferlinghetti's like a Formula One driver, leaves me in the dust.
I have an engine that doesn't run on petroleum.
He says it runs on pure energy. Actually, Ferlinghetti is a lifelong critic of American car culture, calls it Autogeddon.
Autogeddon is sweeping the country, and there's no stopping it.
There's nothing that can be done?
Well, yes, there's things that can be done, but they would be revolutionary, and the United States isn't ready for revolution.
Ferlinghetti's rejection of capitalism, his doomsday worldview, drive his approach to life and literature. This is the best advice he has to offer the young.
Duck and run for cover.
I had an unhappy childhood. I saw Lindbergh land. I looked homeward and saw no angel.
You can hear the 1-2 punch of adult world weariness and childlike fun in this vintage recording of Ferlinghetti reciting an excerpt from his best-selling 1958 poetry collection, A Coney Island of the Mind.
I got caught stealing pencils from the 5 and 10 cent store the same month I made Eagle Scout.
Ferlinghetti was born in 1919 in Yonkers, New York. In his new book, Little Boy, the author talks about his early years in a distanced, third-person voice.
He was with Aunt Emily, whom he loved very much.
About how this aunt had volunteered to raise him because his mother, who already had 4 sons, couldn't handle a 5th.
Born a few months after his father died of a heart attack.
Growing up, Ferlinghetti experienced extreme contrasts of wealth and poverty, but poetry has nearly always been in his life. Ferlinghetti came to California in 1950. He was drawn to it as a place where people could start over. It was what he called this country's last frontier. He launched City Lights in San Francisco in 1953 with a mission to break poetry out of its stuffy academic cage and make it accessible to all. It was a massive risk.
We were young and foolish.
Unlike other bookstores around the country, City Lights was open 7 days a week and late into the night. He wanted to create a sense of community, a place for people to toss around ideas. And the business was originally focused on selling paperback books at a time when the literary establishment only cared about hardbacks.
Paperbacks weren't considered as real books. The only paperback books were murder mysteries and some science fiction books.
But Ferlinghetti was all about democratizing literature. City Lights weathered its fair share of ups and downs over the years, like Ferlinghetti's arrest in 1957 on obscenity charges for publishing Allen Ginsberg's groundbreaking epic poem, Howl.
I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix.
City Lights' current publisher and director, Elaine Katzenberger, says the business continues to draw customers from all over the world, despite challenges in the industry.
We don't have bestsellers, and we're not publishing bestsellers, and so staying true to those ideals and maintaining them, that's the hardest thing. And on the other hand, it's the most important thing.
Katzenberger shows me into Ferlinghetti's old corner office upstairs at City Lights. She flips through his Rolodex. A veritable who's who of 20th century literary life.
Studs Terkel, Jack Hirschman, of course, Vincent Ferrini, Saul Zaentz, Mrs. John Dos Passos.
Ferlinghetti's status as a literary institution is palpable. It's no wonder there's a street named after him, and the mayor of San Francisco has proclaimed his birthday March 24th, Lawrence Ferlinghetti Day. I asked Ferlinghetti if he's proud of his many accomplishments.
I don't know, that word proud, it's just too egotistic.
So, how about happy?
Yeah, happy would be better, except when you get down to try and define the word happy, then you're really in trouble.
Instead of all the fuss around his big upcoming birthday, it's near centenarian laughs, and says he'd rather discuss what it would take to start a revolution. For Here and Now, I'm Chloe Veltman in San Francisco.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
Here and Now continues on WHYY.
Supporting WHYY Live Nation, Roseanne Cash unites with Ry Cooder for a musical tribute to Johnny Cash at the Met Philadelphia November 3rd, one of only 5 dates in the country. Tickets available this Friday at noon at Ticketmaster.com. And St. Thomas's Church, White Marsh, Fort Washington, presenting C.S. Lewis Festival Weekend, March 22nd through the 24th, featuring 10 Lewis scholars, including keynote address by Oxford's Dr. Michael Ward. Tickets at stthomaswhitemarsh.org.
50 degrees at 151.
Supporting WHYY Pella Windows and Doors. Introducing the integrated roll screen retractable screen. A screen that appears when you need it and rolls away when you don't. To learn more or schedule an appointment, PellaPhilly.com. And Independence Seaport Museum presents River Alive, a new exhibit about the Delaware River and what lives in the water, on the water, and around the water. Hands-on high-tech activities connect science with art and history. More at phillyseaport.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and your NPR station. From LifeLock. LifeLock with Norton reminds consumers that cyber criminals can steal identities, sell personal information on the dark web, and even infect mobile devices with malware. Learn more at lifelock.com. And NPR and Morning Edition on this station tomorrow morning. What happened while you were sleeping, and the news, interviews, and analysis for the day ahead. National, international, and local news tomorrow on Morning Edition.
It's Here and Now, and let's talk now about an idea that's been central to American life since the country's founding and been contested for almost as long: civility.